might as well jump right into it. Welcome back to Startup Faceoff. We had the question earlier, why is it called Startup Faceoff? Because we're Canadian and it's kind of a founders facing off on topics. We may debate, we may be on the same side, we're not sure. If someone's got a better name for us out there, please send it to me and I'll update it as we go. But with that in mind, we might as well introduce my guests and to my Alex. Sorry, I was trying to point to Alex there, from co-founder of Consulta. How you doing, Alex?
Good. Very excited to be here and see all these friendly faces. I'm looking forward to the debate and the battle.
Why don't you tell us quickly about Consulta?
I'll give you my one-liner. Otherwise, as you all know, it'll be 1 hour. I'm Alex, founder of Consulta.com. We are a marketplace and business community featuring some of the world's best vetted consultants, including this fine gentleman you'll hear from in a minute, John. And I hope maybe down the road very soon, our other guests as well, maybe will be joining us. So really excited to see everyone. And I spend most of my days talking to startups and founders and small business owners. So this is very exciting for me to have an opportunity to ramble on and engage in some great debate around startup world and to hear what everyone else has to share. Oh, Craig, we lost you. Now it's just the beauty.
Oh, I muted myself. And Thyagi, over to you. What's going on with you and Oot?
Great. Thanks so much, Craig, for having me on here. It's great to see familiar faces like John, and nice to meet you, Alex. Great to duke it out, right? So my name is Thyagi. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Oot Social Health. Oot is all about human connectivity, which means that we believe in face-to-face connections. We believe also that essentially face-to-face allows you to be able to create a sense of belonging, where community meets proximity. So that's what we're all about, and we can get into it at some point, what the platform ultimately entails, but we're super pumped to be here, or I'm super pumped to be here today.
And Craig, you're on mute again, but I see my name here, so I'll just go ahead. Great to see everyone. Happy to see you, Thyagi, again, and maybe we'll face off like we used to back in the day. We'll drop the gloves. Looking forward to it. I'm a funding expert. I've been helping startups and small, medium-sized enterprises raise funds, non-dilutive and dilutive. Now I'm actually a founder myself, so it's exciting to be here, exciting to be a part of all this.
Fantastic. And I think we're just going to jump right into it. And I'll try not to mute my mic anymore so we won't have that problem. The first thing we're going to talk about is the government doing enough to help startups in Canada from a funding and support point of view? We've discussed this in a couple of podcasts based on different things shutting down and different programs opening up, John. But we have a couple other founders here, and I thought, let's open it up. What are we struggling with that the government can be doing better? And what programs are out there that maybe we're not taking advantage of? Alex, where do you want to start?
Oh, I love this one. So I'm excited. Are they doing enough? That's a word, enough. The qualification it's a difficult one. When I was first thinking about this, I did kind of initially think, oh yeah, they're doing pretty well compared to, so many other places where we don't have so many opportunities, blah, blah. But then as I started thinking about it more and more, I got angrier and angrier. I was like, no, they definitely could be doing a lot more. And I'll just throw my rambles out there to get us started. And then I can't wait to hear what you all have to add. But, I think basically for me, the challenge is I think the government has created and launched a lot of programs, especially in the last couple of years. And you guys would know better than I would about those. So they're having a lot of initiatives targeted at startups, at small businesses, at immigrants, newcomers, a lot of the underrepresented groups. And so I'm really happy to see that happening. But the programs are still pretty small. Like most of them give you peanuts. I find they're also still hard to find. So if you don't know about them, and if you don't have someone to let you know that they're out there, that's a challenge. I also find they're very hard to qualify and to navigate. You kind of have to know a who's who and what words to use in order to really take advantage of them. And I have lots more rambles around that. And I guess the last piece, before handing it over to some others, I think there's also just like a focus on financial coverage, which is great. We all need money and we all want money, but money without guidance and direction is wasteful. And so there's a lot of money out there, but I think the help could be, could come in other ways. So like in the States through the SBA, they have a lot of programs that are focused more on like advisory. You get programs, you get frameworks, you get kind of structure to help you spend the money wisely. Whereas I find here, it's more like, here's a new program, apply, here's some cash, and then what? So it's a little bit of a vicious cycle. I think we have to work on improving, how these programs are actually implemented. I'll pause. I'm really keen to hear what you have to say.
Thyagi, what do you think?
You know what? For the most part, I agree with you, Alex. I think that there's definitely some areas that I think the government can do more. So I'm right now in the thick of it with our own startup at OOT. And the thing that I think I've discerned in my experience is if you've crossed the chasm, meaning you've crossed the chasm where you've built an MVP or you have a crazy solid team and you have the ability to raise VC funding or external funding and get some solid, investment in place, then the government seems to be very apt to helping you, right? There's a number of programs that are available.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, I do also think now, because I have actually worked with John, because John's provided me with some guidance. I've also reached out to other individuals. Like there's a lovely gentleman named Peter McFadzean, who is an innovation advisor from the government of Canada. And so he's helped me understand and navigate the different grant programs that are available, right? So there's specific grant portals that you can enter into that are specifically for grants that anyone can apply for. And I think now with the advent of ChatGPT, which is fantastic, it's more than ever easier to actually apply for these various programs, because you can, for the most part, start to knock off a number of these various grants that are available to you. So I'm of the opinion that we do have a lot open to us, but it is about surfacing that data. And I think programs like yourself, Craig, that you're sharing in terms of this knowledge sharing that we're doing right now, this is critical, right? So that this information starts to surface, so people are more aware.
Absolutely. That's why we're doing it.
Yeah.
John?
Yeah, don't even get me started. There's a huge disconnect, and there's a lot of barriers that need to be. There's a huge disconnect between the definition of what a startup is from the government's perspective and what an actual startup is, and that's a huge problem. So, and just to reiterate what Thyagi was saying, yeah, it's once you've reached a certain threshold, yeah, there's tons of funding available to you, but it's getting to that threshold. And I know government, the risk averse, right? But still, there's a huge problem with access to non-dilutive funding. There are search engines out there like the Business Benefits Finder that you can use. I know Tyagi's used it. I know Alex, you've used it. It's okay. But there's thousands and thousands and thousands of different types of funding out there. Anything from if you want to write a book to you want to build a video game, everything like that. But the problem is finding it. And like even myself as a funding expert, it's difficult to get into a new industry and find those grants. Like I'm now doing health industry stuff, and there's so many opportunities in the health industry that I wasn't aware of because I was focused mostly on software development outside of just health. So there's a huge barrier to access these types of funding. Not only so to kind of go off of Tyagi's point too, ChatGPT, with the advent of ChatGPT being introduced, it kind of goes to show you that the whole application process is a broken process, because if we can use these AIs to apply, well then it's there's a lot of change that needs to come. And I know that the government did announce that they are going to look at the SHRED program this year and a couple of other things. They've got a bunch of other things in the works, but it takes forever to get any change done.
Yeah.
If I can just add, because I did write down a few websites and grant programs that I would
Please
love
do.
to share. So, for example, OntarioBusinessGrants.com. In addition to the benefits finder, I found that this website is phenomenal. Phenomenal. So OntarioBusinessGrants.com. The other one is there's the digital technology supercluster that, for all intents and purposes, that was literally a Google search. And, you know, we got into it. We had to do a very formal RFP type process, but it was great. Grants and Contribution System Canada. I had no idea there was a Grants and Contribution System Canada. This is a government portal that you need to register, you know, obviously as a Canadian entity. And I think that's it for what I have. Oh, yep. And then Business Benefits Finder that you mentioned, John. So I think there's a number of different tools out there, but even getting in contact with someone from the Government of Canada, like that gentleman who's an innovation advisor. So if you go on LinkedIn and you type up innovation advisor, Government of Canada, you'll find a number of folks. That's what their role is to help advise you to maneuver inside the government funding process.
We've also got a couple of web pages on TorontoStarts.com, one about grants and loans and one about tax credits programs. It's not exhaustive, but it's a place to start for people. On top of these, all the links that were mentioned will be in the show notes, so take a look at those. Those are great resources. There's a lot of money available. It's just not necessarily available at the right time for the right companies, but it's also, I believe, there is a flip side where a lot of companies are looking for money when they're not ready, and the government gives money to companies when they're not ready for it. So I think there's a big disconnect to that, where we need to be qualifying the companies better. But maybe, you know, John and I discuss this once in a while on our Future Tech podcast, that we should be a little bit more generous with smaller amounts of money earlier, but force them to track KPIs. And once they reach a certain level, then they become potentially eligible for other funding once they've met certain go-to-market criteria, ROI, certain number of clients, whatever. There's a lot of things we can put in place. Then they get potentially more money. I think there's a lot of money going on at the 200,000 plus level when there should be more money going on at the $25,000 level.
Yeah,
if that makes
Good point. Yeah,
I would add to that too, like Craig, for me, I would think, you know, there's a lot of danger in the programs as well. And John, you mentioned that as well. Like, you know, even when we talk about startups, it's right. And what is the definition of a startup? That's always a starting point, right? We don't even share the same vocabulary, what the government considers a startup. And even what we do, are we like, even for the purposes of our conversation today, like startups, probably we're mostly talking about tech startups. And that's pretty different, right, than startups in other industries and like the challenges that they face. Like, we're very spoiled in the tech industry to have low capital, low startup costs. Like, it's very easy for us to spin up a company and like try it out and see where that goes. And the risks are so much, and the investment is so much greater for those trying to start up a business in another sector, right? So, you know, even like that starting point limits kind of where we're going. And John, you mentioned that too, kind of your foray into the health tech, and like, you know, there are many more opportunities there, but it's also like there's a lot more risk involved. And I think, Craig, to your point that you just mentioned in terms of the amounts, that is also like a problem that I see and have experienced myself. Like, when I started this company, you know, the government kind of was like throwing money away. And this was, it's not intended to be that way, but there are so many programs that are intended to kind of like to make it easy and skyrocket, right? So there are tons of these like micro grants, like a lot of the, you know, 5K or less kind of get you up and started, that are meant to kind of inspire founders, take their idea from, you know, just a concept that they're working on as a side gig, to give them a little cash to be able to get started. But, you know, I think those can be quite dangerous, right? Because, you know, $5,000 can be great if this is your side hustle and you just need a little money to cover some expense. But $5,000 is really dangerous, right, when you're starting a company, because I think it lets people think they have more money than they do. And then you go start taking on commitments. Now it's like, oh, I'm going to hire people. I'm going to commit to an agency. I'm going to take on these things now that I have a little bit of extra cash to like alleviate that burden. And so I find a lot of the startup programs and like funding support are really those small amounts that are kind of the riskiest. And then, you know, as you mentioned, and then when it jumps to like real money, the real money in the 100, 200, 500 plus K, those ones, it's like dealing with a different and startup at a different level of maturity, right? So like, it's okay for them to have, you know, institutional partners that are required for a lot of these, or to have way more customers and like proven market base. And so, you know, Craig, to your point, it's that part in the middle that I think is really, you know, like that's the big gap to fill. And then just the last thing, I think, you know, what you were talking about too, but kind of having need for some kind of KPIs and measurement. I think that that's the other piece that, again, I don't know what your experiences are here in the panel. To me, it's like, it's kind of funny how extreme it's been. So when it comes to like the government programs for example, the hiring grants, there are a lot of the programs, right, being offered now to support like co-op students and the summer jobs. There's a lot of the digital skills programs for those under 30. I think these are all great programs. They have, to me, they have the right idea in mind, which is like finding opportunities for people who aren't given them easily otherwise. So I think the idea and the sentiment is right there. But in my experience, you know, it's been kind of crazy. Sometimes these programs, like the hoops that you have to go through as the employer, it makes it not worth it. Sometimes there's so much paperwork involved in creating the roles and explaining them and positioning and the training and the onboarding, and they want the proof and they want this and then the reporting, and you know, and so if you're hiring a junior employee to come help you out for a bit, like you just get absolutely bludgeoned with paperwork to the point that it's not worth it. Like most of my interns and short-term term appointments for junior staff, I just stopped because it was just too much work. Or on the other extreme, there's some programs where it was really easy and it was like too easy. And it was like, oh, great, I'm going to hire someone. And thank you, tax-paying Canadians, all of you. You're going to cover this person's full salary for 6 months. So all of a sudden, how wonderful, I have an army of people and my team just, you know, quadrupled. That was wonderful. It required basically no effort and very little, as you said, from like a reporting perspective. But again, really dangerous, because 6 months later, now, you know, I'm running a business and I have X number of people on payroll, and like, who knows if the business is actually performing well enough to be able to set that up. So I think a lot of these programs, like, they have really good intentions, but the execution can be really dangerous for the businesses that, like, we're trying to take advantage of these programs, and we end up, like, I think it's actually doing some harm to some of the businesses that are being set up.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's and you hit the nail on the head too. Like, for $50,000, sometimes they're asking you to write a 20-page application to get access $50,000, and then all the admin and overhead on top of that. It's just, a lot of times it's not worth it for the effort, for the outcome, right? So, and you're asking like these startups to fill out a 20-page application. They don't know how to fill these out. They're taking hours and hours and hours. So there needs to be a more streamlined process, and I don't know what that is. I don't know if anyone's figured that out, but yeah, absolutely, it needs to be a more streamlined process, and there needs to be more advertising done as far as what is out there. Like, even a simple, why can't we have a central repository of all of these programs? Like, yeah.
And I think you see a lot of the like, you know, a lot of our partners are trying to do that, but it's a gap in the system, right? Like, you guys, Thyagi already mentioned a few. I know our partners, like, we're partnered with Pocketed, we're partnered with Layton, we're partnered with Swoop, we're partnered with a lot of organizations, and that's what they're doing, is building these databases of funding and grant programs. And, you know, John, I know that this is your zone, so you're very well aware of all of these, but even them, like, they can't capture all of them, they can't keep up. It's overwhelming. And then even then, if you, to your point, like, even if you have knowledge of the programs, keeping track of the deadlines and then having the skills to, sufficiently apply and actually make it worth your time.
This is where I'm going to debate you, Alex, because I think that as a founder, it's important for us to be resourceful, right? So I've made it a point myself for every quarter to do my homework. So I do Google searches and I do a bit of like a quarterly cadence around grants. I think that this is a great exercise for myself to educate myself. And I know my business partner, Paul Grease, he's always like befuddled, right? He's like, how do you find these things? And I'm like, good old Google, I just type in certain search terms and keywords and boom, a whole bunch of different programs you can apply for. So I think it's incumbent on ourselves to do a little bit of research and then make the determination of whether it's worth it or not. So
I totally agree with what you're doing, Thyagi, but I have to say that you are unique. You're just like some superhuman that is able to.
No, not at all.
No, but okay.
I just believe in time boxing.
Absolutely. No, I totally get your approach, and that's what most founders should be doing. But you're a unique case, I have to say, and that's awesome what you're doing because you're enabling yourself.
I think, this is what this program is about, right? Us knowledge sharing. Mm-hmm. So I'm just sharing what works for me, and if it works for other folks, great.
I got one other question before we move on. Why are founders so afraid of non-diluted funding? I don't understand. I was talking to one founder just this week, and doing something specific at hardware, and we're talking about pilot. And I said, hey, why don't you go to Futurepreneur? They've got matching grants for up to low interest to no interest loans, up to 60 grand to help you launch your pilot and get going. And you say, well, if it's a loan, I'm going to have to pay it back. So I'd rather just do it with my own money. And I'm like, well, great. But if it's a low interest loan from the government, which Futurepreneur and BDC are, say you get 50 grand, let's just say, and you do your pilot and it works, doesn't work, you gotta change things, you gotta redo hardware, whatever happens at the end of the pilot, you still have your own 50 grand. Yeah, you have to pay that back. But it's first payment enough for 2 years. Your runway is so much bigger. But at the same time, you're looking for VC financing to help you fund this. And you got to say, well, that's the most expensive money you're going to get. How does the government or the community get founders thinking differently about that? Like, seriously, you'd rather spend your own 50 grand than take a small business loan from the government who's providing this specifically for you to do this, and keep that money so that you got a longer runway, that you can do so many other things. Why are people not thinking that way?
I think it's because it's instilled from them from the start that dilutive funding is the way to go. Like that's what you're focused on. You want to get a pre-seed, you want to get a seed, you want to get a Series A. And so there's a lot of knowledge and there's a lot of discussions happening around the dilutive side of funding, and there's less conversations around non-dilutive. And I think there's a huge disconnect in how difficult it is to get, what the actual details are of the loan, and possibly the trust of the government as well, like not trusting that, I really can get a zero interest loan, I don't believe it, kind of thing. That's what I get a lot of times too. So I think there's a lot of factors that come into play. I think there's less conversations around non-dilutive, more conversations around dilutive that make it more, that seem like it's more approachable for founders to go after. But again, battle me out if you guys disagree.
I don't know. I think actually, and Craig, I think this will go really nicely to the next topic when you're ready. But, for me, I think it's all psychology. I think, John, you're right. I agree that there's just less conversation talking about it. Like, people don't even know. They're like, what is that? We just don't talk about it as much. But I think there's something psychological happening too. One, I don't know about you guys, I was very much raised to be debt averse. So, the idea of having $1 owing, actually raises my blood pressure. And so that applies in my personal life, but also very much in my business life. So my first business loans, my accountant will tell you, she was like, do this. It's a great rate. As you said, 0%, take advantage. And I was like, oh my God, absolutely not. It was really painful for me just to conceptually kind of bridge the gap and being like, oh my God, I'm committing, right? And so there was something there. But I also think it goes to like, again, like confidence in your own business and business model, right? To your point, like if, you know, Craig, what you were saying about like, you're going to take that 50K, like it's weird because we ask founders, we ask angels, we ask VCs, like we want their money, and we feel pretty confident in getting in front of them and saying, my business is awesome. And this is why I'm unique. And this is why you should invest in me. But then it's strange that most founders are not necessarily easily ready to go put their money where their mouth is too, right? And so I know it's a dangerous like line to cross, but I think it is just psychologically kind of traumatic to be like, wow, okay, I'm going to go put in my own 20 or 50 or 100K into this. But at the same time, I kind of think that we should see that from founders, right? Like if your product and your startup is that awesome and unique and special, and you are doing something great, aren't you willing to take a bet on yourself? Right? And like, how do you expect all these other people to back you if you're not willing to kind of dive in and take that risk first?
I would love to just add one point to this, which is the way I see debt, right? Because that's ultimately what we're talking about, is we have to see it from the standpoint of even purchasing a home. Mm-hmm. It's an investment. You typically make investments in your life. So I personally see a lot of debt, right? And the thing is, I've always, you know, my significant other, he thinks I'm slightly freewheeling. However, I have multiple investments in multiple diversified portfolios to ensure that I have diversity in my investments. But doing a startup is an investment. You're investing your time, you're investing your resources, you're investing your reputation, you're investing a number of key elements of what makes up you, including your resources. So I think we need to reframe it from debt to investment, and making sure that we put the wherewithal to ensure that that investment comes to fruition. I think that's ultimately what it boils down to.
Totally.
Yeah.
Topic. I'm disagreeing. Houses should not be used as an investment.
Yeah.
You know what? I disagree with you. There you go. I disagree with you because you know what? Most of even my primary residences have been extremely fruitful for me in multiple ways by way of leverage. Sure. So for various reasons.
My last thought, and I'm going to jump in, and I've rearranged the questions because Thyagi has to leave early just in case, and this one's taking a while, is if you have the money and you're looking for VC and angel money investment, but you don't want to take a loan, even though you have the money to do this, you know, here's the thought, especially in this scenario, your company is worth way more after a pilot, after spending that $50,000 on a pilot with a couple letters of intent, and you've deployed this thing. I'm not going to say what it was, and you've got the experience doing it. You got hundreds of transactions or whatever. Your valuation is way more than right now when it's just an idea and you're not doing anything. Mm-hmm. And so spending that money is probably, whether it's your money or a loan, is probably the best money you're ever going to spend. But you're going from a $2 million idea to a $20 million idea once you've done a pilot. And that, you know, now you're seeking funding at 20 million rather than at a 2 million valuation and that kind of stuff. It's crazy.
And that's exactly the type of frame of mind that, like, I think like startups should be thinking about, right? We should be looking at the math. We should be looking at the valuations. We should be understanding what our risk tolerance is as individuals and who's part of our team that could potentially burden the risk as well. But all of those things need to factor in, and then you can make a decision accordingly. But you got to take all of those factors into play.